You're listening to the Big 550 KTRS. Tony Messenger filling in for McGraw-Millhaven today. Last time I filled in for McGraw, he was just moving into his new house. I don't know where he is today. We'll have to call the folks at CNN and see if they can find a ping and, maybe do 7 or 8 hours of Where's McGraw-Millhaven. Interesting story out of O'Fallon recently. O'Fallon, Missouri, not O'Fallon, Illinois. A police officer there is under investigation for allegedly stealing some drugs that were locked up in the evidence locker. If you watch enough crime TV on television like I do, you know that at least in the minds of Hollywood executives, this sort of thing happens all the time. Well, we've got a guest today who has a company that actually works with local police stations to make sure that this sort of thing doesn't happen. With us is Tim McIntyre from Primary Marketing Systems. Tim, how you doing?
I'm good, Tony. Thanks for having me this morning.
No problem. Thanks for coming in so early. Tell us about your e-twist system and how it could have related to this O'Fallon police situation with the missing drugs.
Well, what our e-twist system does, it tracks evidence from the inception, from when it's taken out in the field, before it gets into the back end. So when an officer picks up a piece of evidence, that evidence is recorded. We GPS coordinate it. We do the latitude, longitude, altitude. We take all kinds of pictures, and we tie it back into their DSN, which is their badge number, department serial number, and their password. So now we know, time and date stamped, that Tony collected this cup at this particular time and date, and we put a barcode on it. And at that point, the barcode filters through the entire system. And as it moves through the system, depending on where it goes, each individual person that needs to be alerted, an email, if you will, if something transpires with that particular piece of evidence, that particular or respective person or groups can then be notified through a simple email that, hey, this particular piece of evidence has moved, and you were the one who requested it move.
So walk me through this physically, and again, I'll use the TV cop drama example because listeners probably get it, and I like TV cop dramas. So I'm at the scene of the crime. I've got my gloves on. I've pulled out my little plastic baggie, and I'm about to pick up a piece of evidence. Am I pulling out a cell phone app at this point, or what am I doing to make sure that from there I'm out there in the field? This piece of evidence is getting recorded in the system.
Well, our software, eTwist, is patented, and it runs on virtually every platform out there. We don't operate on the I platform. The I platform just doesn't hold up for law enforcement. So you would have the app on your, let's just call it a PDA on steroids, or your cell phone, okay, or your tablet, or what have you. And we take you through the steps to collect this piece of evidence. We've talked to a number of different law enforcement agents throughout the United States and here in St. Louis. There's basically 6 things that need to be entered that are relevant to every case. There could be a whole lot more, but there's basically 6 pieces of information that we collect. Once we collect those, then we know exactly who touched what, when they touched it, where it was, and what that particular piece of evidence was.
Does it cut down on tampering? And you always hear in cases, there was issues with collecting the evidence, and then next thing you know, they've lost some of the evidence. So this is kind of a safeguard in doing something like that and making sure that it's not tampered with, or just to let everyone know who's involved, where it is and where you can find it.
Yes to both questions, Kelly. What this does, we can't stop bad guys from being bad guys. Mm-hmm. And bad guys have guns and knives. They have laptops. I'm hesitant to say they have a gun and a badge at times. But bad guys will go where there is the least amount of chance for them to get caught doing something. If they know that the systems track everything throughout the entire process, then they're more likely to go somewhere else. And if they know that someone is responsible for this, then they're likely to go somewhere else. Can things get misplaced? If a human doesn't do their job, sure. We have systems that will guarantee that they don't get misplaced. But in most cases, they're very expensive. Hellsberg's Diamonds, for instance, over in Kansas City, we do some barcoding and data collection for them. Those are very sophisticated systems.
So Tim, earlier in my career, I spent a fair amount of time in courtrooms covering murder cases and that sort of thing. And in almost every big murder drug case, high-profile case, there is a period during the trial in which the chain of evidence becomes a part of the trial, and defense attorneys will frequently find weaknesses in that chain of evidence. Has your system yet been sort of tested in which the chain of evidence through the barcode is right there on the system and makes it easier for police and prosecutors to get a conviction?
Well, our systems have been in use for the last 4.5 years here in St. Louis. It's used elsewhere throughout the United States. They're taught at LSU's counterterrorism school. They're used at a DHS component. We are sure that it has been put through the ringer or bloodied in court. We don't generally follow up on it. The only time we would get a call is if there was a problem, and we have never had a phone call.
So where are you being used here in St. Louis?
Well, the ones I can discuss with you is Maplewood, Creve Coeur, and Frontenac here in St. Louis.
Okay, and why can't you discuss others?
Yeah.
Well, some of the other policing agencies have asked us not to say anything.
Meaning that they don't want their cops necessary. Well,
their cops or their bad guys or whomever.
Whomever they're trying to keep track of. That's interesting. Very interesting. Tim McIntyre with Premier. I'm going to get this right. Premier Marketing Systems uses an e-twist evidence tool to make sure that what's going on in O'Fallon, Missouri right now, in which police officers being investigated for possibly stealing some drugs out of the evidence locker, trying to make sure that stuff doesn't happen so that the evidence can be tracked. Thanks for being with us this morning. I appreciate it.
Thanks very much for having me, Tony.
No problem. You're listening to the Big 550 KTRS McGraw-Millhaven. Tony Messenger filling in today. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back,